Welcome to The Cap, where we are here to speak with college reps and other professionals in the field of college admissions to help answer all your questions and guide you through every step of the process. So if you're serious about college admissions, you've come to the right place. Are you ready? Let's talk about it. And now, here's your host, Dr. John Durante. Welcome to The Cap, the College Admissions Process Podcast. I am your host, John Durante, and I am here to introduce you to college admissions representatives and other professionals in the field of college admissions. Our purpose is to serve you, the students and parents, so that you may gain insight straight from the people who ultimately make the decisions. Regardless of whether you apply to a particular school being highlighted in a given episode, you should listen to all of them, as each guest will give you tremendous insight and advice on every aspect of the college admissions process, prompting you to come up with your own follow-up questions for when you visit campus or meet with a college admissions representative yourself. Don't forget to visit our website, www.collegeadmissionstalk.com, or the show notes of each episode to access the alphabetical list of all the colleges available with the related audio link to the right of each school. The alphabetical list provides you with on-demand access to all of the episodes so that you may listen whenever you wish. And if you want to receive links to episodes before they are released on the podcast, along with other related resources, please fill out the email opt-in form also available on our website and in the show notes of each episode. Lastly, please email me with any questions or comments at collegeadmissionstalk@gmail.com. So are you ready? Let's talk about it. Welcome to The Cap, the College Admissions Process Podcast. I am your host, John Durante, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today Drew Newitt, who's an undergraduate admissions counselor at Rutgers University on the New Brunswick campus in beautiful New Jersey. Drew, thank you so much for being here today. How are you?
I'm great, John. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate with you, and looking forward to our conversation.
Well, Drew, I have to tell you, I'm looking forward to it as well because I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and so many friends and family members from Brooklyn moved to Staten Island or to New Jersey, and I can't tell you how many family members or friends talk about Rutgers University. So it's so great to have you. So Drew, let's get started. First, give us a brief introduction about yourself. How long have you been in admissions, and how did you end up in such a position?
Well, I hate to admit it, but I believe I am in my 38th year in the
Wow.
college admissions profession.
Awesome.
I started pretty much as a campus tour guide when I was an undergraduate at my undergraduate university or undergraduate college, giving campus tours for the admissions office there. This was back in the early and mid 1980s. Found I really liked meeting students. I really liked all the people that I encountered in admissions while I was working for the admissions office. And when I was graduating, partly because I had a Bachelor of Arts in biology and no interest in pursuing anything like med school, I decided, well, let's give this admissions a try, and got my first real admissions job right after I graduated in 1986. And I've been with it ever since for a variety of colleges, universities. Actually started with Rutgers admissions in the fall of 2019.
Well, that's fantastic. And I know that Rutgers University is so fortunate to have you, as are we, on this podcast episode. So, Drew, what is it that you love about Rutgers University that makes it such a great choice for so many students and their families?
Great question. And I could go on for an hour or two, but I'll try and keep it short. I use the mnemonic of a lot, ALOT, when I'm talking with students and families about all the possible reasons why they might want to consider Rutgers New Brunswick. A is for academics. We've got a huge number and variety of majors, and then you add minors, combined degree programs. You can come to Rutgers, New Brunswick, and you can study everything from fish in our marine sciences major to bait in our business school. And for those of you that aren't familiar with bait, in the business world, it stands for Business Analytics and Information Technology, and that's actually one of the degree programs in the Rutgers Business School. Moving on, L, life. Student life in particular. We have a huge variety of student clubs and organizations. I think we're closing in on 750 different ones. Everything from our Division I Big Ten athletics to a very popular student club on campus is the Seeing Eye Dog Puppy Raising Club.
Hmm.
And it's just what it sounds like. It's a group of our students who work with a local community agency. That agency trains dogs to become seeing eye and service dogs. And there's a period of time when the dogs are puppies, when they're kind of too young to be formally trained as service dogs, but they still need to be acclimated to doing things like being out in public and being in crowded situations. So the students in the club, they bring the puppies on campus and they take them to the library and to the student center and out on the lawns and basically help get the dogs used to being around people. And then after about a year and a half of that, they return them to the organization and they continue with the training of them. I asked the students and like, is that like the most popular student club on campus? And yeah, well, it's definitely up there.
Sure.
In addition to student life, residence life. One of the advantages to being at Rutgers, New Brunswick is we have a very large number of students that live on campus. Currently, it's about 16,000 each year. And that's on campus. That's not even including students that might get an apartment nearby off campus. That ensures that there is always a lot of things going on, whether it's athletic events, student organization meetings, cultural organizations, arts, music, concerts, pretty much a constant stream of activities on our events calendar. Moving on through a lot. Opportunities. Well, everything from internships, study abroad. We have over 120 different study abroad programs through Rutgers, research opportunities, and finally, networking. And last but not least, traditions. When you are a college, or in this case, a university, that has been around literally longer than the United States of America, you develop a lot of traditions. At
Sure.
Rutgers, they take the form of everything from Rutgers Day, which is every spring, and it celebrates all things Rutgers, to Hot Dog Day, which celebrates all things hot dogs. So lots of kind of interesting and many of them fun traditions have developed over the years at the university.
Well, I love how you talked about the acronym a lot: academics, student life, opportunities, and of course, all of those great traditions that you mentioned. I love that 16,000 students live on your campus. And so by default, there's definitely a lot going on, not only in your classrooms with all your majors and minors that you offer, but also outside of your classrooms to keep the students engaged, busy, and happy. And I mentioned that because, Drew, I recently read that your retention rate is 93%, which is high compared to the national average, which is at about 70%. So, what's the secret in keeping so many students so happy and wanting to come back year after year?
John, there's a lot to it.
Hmm.
First, let me clarify that the 93% retention rate that you mentioned specifically is our freshman to sophomore year retention rate. So, of
Hmm.
all the students that finish their first year, on average, about 93% of them return for at least their second year. And fortunately, many of them continue on through graduation. Um, I think probably the biggest contributor to that retention rate is just there is a very strong sense of community at Rutgers, New Brunswick, and I would go as far as to say a sense of family. Um, to go back to when I was interviewing for this position originally, both of the people interviewing me at Rutgers mentioned the Scarlet Knights family.
Hmm.
And after the second person mentioned it, I said, hold on a second. All right. You just finished telling me that there's 37,000 undergraduate students attending this institution. You really expect me to believe that there's a sense of family here? And he smiled knowingly and said, you might not get it now, but Drew, you'll get it eventually. And
Hmm.
now, 4.5 years later, I get it. It is kind of astounding, but there is a very strong sense of what our current president refers to as the beloved community at Rutgers. It's kind of has its origins or its focus on a feeling of belonging, of being part of something bigger than yourself. And again, whether it's being part of the Scarlet Knights family, or whether it's being part of the overall community at the university. It's a very common theme or feeling that runs through many of the things that go on at Rutgers New Brunswick. And it's something that you will hear not only our current students, but also significantly our alumni talk about. And the fact that whether they graduated from Rutgers 5 years ago or 50 years ago, time and again, they will talk about the fact that from the day they arrived at the university, they felt, hey, I belong here. This
Hmm.
is right for me. Beyond that, we really, really support our students. And that takes a variety of forms, but certainly academically, to make sure that they are not at risk of having academic problems and struggling and maybe eventually deciding that they're not going to be successful at the university, but also socially, mentally. We want to make sure that our students are getting any and all support that they might feel that they need at any point along the way, and not only to be successful at Rutgers, but once they leave us. We want to make sure that they're going to go out and join our proud Scarlet Knights alumni family.
Well, I love that. I love the explanation of the Scarlet Knights family and how you talk about you're very mindful of supporting all of your students while they're on your campus, but also understanding the importance of setting them up for whatever it is that they do once they leave your campus to join that large alumni network. So let's talk a little bit about Rutgers structure. Drew, could you explain how Rutgers is structured and what effect it has on the application process? For example, can a student apply to more than one Rutgers campus or academic school?
Sure. So let's start with the basics. Rutgers is the State University of New Jersey. As
Hmm.
such, there are three distinct Rutgers campuses or locations. They are kind of from north to south in the state of New Jersey: Newark, New Jersey, New Brunswick, New Jersey, and Camden, New Jersey. At each of those three campuses, there are then multiple academic schools at each of the campuses. At Rutgers New Brunswick, which is considered it's the largest and considered the flagship of the three campuses, there are actually 11 different undergraduate schools. However, students applying as first year applicants to Rutgers New Brunswick can only apply to 7 of those 11. The other ones are considered what we call upper division schools. So when a student applies to Rutgers, they will be submitting a single application to Rutgers University. However, on that application, they will be indicating or designating one or more academic schools at Rutgers that they wish to be considered for admission to. Those multiple schools could be all on a single campus, or they could be spread out over 2 or even all 3 of the campuses. When a student does not have to apply to multiple schools, but it's certainly an option, and we generally recommend it to almost all of our applicants. If a student does apply to more than one academic school at Rutgers, they will actually be considered for admission separately by each school, and they will receive a admissions decision for every school that they apply to within Rutgers University.
Well, we appreciate that. And I like the explanation that there are three campuses. Again, that's Newark, New Brunswick, and Camden. You mentioned that New Brunswick, which is the school that you're affiliated with, is the largest, the flagship, if you will, with 11 undergraduate schools. So we appreciate that. And for students interested in specific programs or schools within Rutgers, how does the application review process differ, if at all? For example, are there any portfolios or interviews required for any of your schools or a student's intended major?
Yeah, that's a great question, John. The short answer is there's really only uh, one exception to the general rule, and that is at Rutgers New Brunswick. We have what it's called the Mason Gross School of the Arts. Mason Gross is a just phenomenal, wonderful, small, fine, and performing arts conservatory that happens to be embedded within Rutgers New Brunswick, a
Hmm.
wonderful large public university. So, for students interested in applying to any of the BFA, Bachelor of Fine Arts programs, or we also offer a BM, a Bachelor in Music program, through Mason Gross School of the Arts, those applicants are required to submit what's called a talent assessment, and that would usually be either a portfolio that they submit of their artwork or an audition for either the BFA in theater or the music major. So those applicants are required to take that extra step, if you will, beyond applicants to our other schools at the university. The talent assessment part of the application does play a very large role in the admissions decisions being made by Mason Gross School of the Arts. It does get back to the idea that I just mentioned, that when students apply to more than one Rutgers school, they are being considered for admission independently by each school. So as a good example, although Mason Gross School of the Arts at Rutgers New Brunswick offers the BFA programs and the Bachelor of Music programs, our School of Arts and Sciences at Rutgers New Brunswick also offers some majors in art and music and theater, but they are offered as BA or Bachelor of Arts degrees in the School of Arts and Sciences. So what we have sometimes happen is a student may be interested in pursuing theater and perhaps acting, might actually apply to both Mason Gross School of the Arts for the BFA in theater acting, but also to the School of Arts and Sciences for the BA in theater. The main difference in the admissions process between those two programs is that the talent assessment part of the application, in other words, in this case, a audition, would not normally be required for students applying for the BA in theater through the School of Arts and Sciences. I know it can get rather confusing. Believe me, I still get confused about it sometimes. But the basic idea is, if a student is really focused and interested in pursuing something in the art world, whether it's fine or performing arts, they are probably going to be looking at applying to Mason Gross School of the Arts within Rutgers, and they will experience a somewhat different application process and decision-making process by applying to Mason Gross versus one of our other schools.
Well, you explained it beautifully, and it goes to show that Rutgers University has something for everyone, and frankly, a lot more than just something for everyone. It really is amazing. You explained how within the arts there are so many choices, which I think is phenomenal for the students and the parents to hear. By the way, one of the reasons why we have conversations like this is that we want parents and their students to hear it, and hopefully they reflect on it, come up with their own follow-up questions, so that when they meet with you or a colleague on campus or at a college fair, they're going to have better questions, better follow-up questions to ask when they meet with someone. And of course, Drew, just so you know, I always put the Office of Undergraduate Admissions in the show notes. If there are any other links that you want to include, please just send them to me. And of course, we'll make it available to the students and their parents. So
Great.
going back to just some simple basics, Drew, what are the different ways to apply to Rutgers? And is there a benefit to applying one way over the other? And of course, I'm talking about whether or not you have early decision, regular decision, or early action.
Great. Yes, currently Rutgers New Brunswick offers both regular decision with a December 1st deadline for the students' senior year in high school, and early action. And the due date for early action applicants is November 1st. The early action program is a non-binding program. So really the only difference or benefit, if you will, to applying EA, early action, at Rutgers New Brunswick over regular decision is the EA student will get their admissions decision, or decisions plural, back about a month sooner than applying regular decision. Um, Typically, we try and release all of our early action admissions decisions by the end of January, and then follow up with all of our regular decisions by the end of February. So that's really, at least as Rutgers New Brunswick goes, that's really the primary benefit for a student applying EA, is that they will find out sooner whether they have been accepted to the university or not.
Hi, John. This is Cami from the University of Michigan. My favorite thing about Dormify is how supportive they are with all things college. Dormify is truly like a big sister, guiding you throughout the entire college journey. From relatable content on social media to tips on how to maximize your space, Dormify has the answer for everything. I highly recommend incoming freshmen, college students to check out Dormify on social media for all things college. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Cami, for sharing your thoughts on Dormify. For those of you listening, be sure to check out our show notes where you could find our Dormify affiliate link and our most updated coupon code where you can save 15% on most Dormify products. As a reminder, our podcast does receive a small commission for purchases made through our affiliate link, but rest assured, we only promote products that we believe in and feel would benefit you, our listeners. Thank you, and best wishes to all. Well, we appreciate that, and I just want to repeat, there are two ways to apply that are both, of course, non-binding. You have your regular decision, which the deadline is December 1st, and early action with a November 1st deadline. So, Drew, just a quick follow-up. What about for merit-based scholarships? Does that affect it at all?
That's a great question, John. So, as long as the student submits their admissions application and completes their application file by the regular decision due date, which is December 1st, they're guaranteed several things. One, they're guaranteed full consideration for admission to any and all Rutgers schools that they have applied to. Two, they are guaranteed consideration for our honors college and some of our school-based honors programs if they indicated an interest in those programs on their application. And three, and probably most importantly, if they complete their application by December 1st, they are guaranteed consideration for Merit Scholarship Award if they are admitted to their first choice school at the university.
Fantastic. And if you could just elaborate a little bit on the Honors College, because you mentioned that they have to indicate, I'm assuming with their initial application, that they're interested. There are many schools out there that, might invite you to apply after they review your application. So if you could just unpackage that a little bit more for us, Drew, I would appreciate it.
Sure. It actually changed at Rutgers New Brunswick this year over previous years. So starting this year, for students applying for this coming fall for 2024, we added a question and section on our application for admission and thereby on the Common App that basically described briefly our honors college, which is a residential honors college at Rutgers New Brunswick, and some of our schools, for example, the School of Arts and Sciences, offer school-based honors programs to our students. So we created a question on the application that pretty much said, does this sound interesting to you? And if so, would you like to be considered for admission or an invitation to participate in either the Honors College or one of the school-based honors programs? And if they said yes, they would also then submit an additional supplemental essay specific to the Honors College and the Honors programs consideration. So it was a change this year for us. It seems to have worked pretty well. We won't know for sure until we actually see how many of our students who have been offered admission to the Honors College and the honors programs accept that offer and enroll in those specialized programs this fall.
Well, that's terrific. Thank you so much. And of course, Drew, the overall number of applications schools are receiving continue to be on the rise. So with an increase in applications, how do you determine how many students to accept, waitlist, or even deny when you don't necessarily know how many of these applicants will attend if accepted?
Well, have you ever heard the phrase guesstimate? I'm only half joking. So this is a really pertinent question for Rutgers New Brunswick this year. This was the first year that Rutgers was on the Common application. And I would love to be able to take credit for this, but unfortunately, it's pretty much all due to that fact that we not only saw an increase in our application numbers at Rutgers New Brunswick this year, we saw a very large increase. We were up a little over, I believe, 63%
Oh my.
more applications for first-year student admission this year than last year,
Wow.
which was about twice as much as we thought we might get more
Wow.
of an increase. So yeah, it took us a little bit by surprise, and it's meant it's been a very busy winter for the university admissions office. But it's that's a phenomenal question. Certainly, one of the ways is simply to look at historical data on the admissions and enrollment side, and you can get a pretty good feel or idea over time at looking at, well, for a certain number of admitted and enrolled students in a given year, how many did we admit that year? And on average, over the last 10 years or 15 years, how many students did we need to admit to enroll a certain number that we wanted for our entering class? We also can kind of drill down a little bit deeper in the data and look at things like sometimes even on a high school specific basis. Looking back over the last 8, 10, 12 years, for a certain high school or in a certain geographic area of the country, um, how what percentage, for example, historically of our admitted students from a certain area or our applicants from a certain area have ended up enrolling at the university. But that said, there is always going to be some element of educated guesswork. And it's always a surprise. We won't know, and we never know how accurate we were in these estimations until students show up in the fall for classes to start. We are, I will say that at least at Rutgers New Brunswick, um, along with this large increase in applications this fall, unfortunately for our applicants this fall, we are actually not looking at increasing our new student enrollment. So we're targeting an entering class this fall at New Brunswick of about 7,700 first-year students. That's pretty much the same number that we looked at last fall. We're certainly hoping that after this kind of anomalous year, being our first year on the Common App, that things will start to quiet down and return to more normal levels for subsequent years. But again, we're kind of going to have to wait and see how it all works out.
Well, it definitely goes to show that the Common App certainly streamlines the process for so many students. It's very easy to apply to multiple schools using that one platform. So, Drew, I know that you talked about your incoming classes at about 7,700. Do you have an estimate of approximately how many applications you actually received in this past cycle?
Yeah. If I had a minute, I could probably get you the exact number to date, but it's on the order of 68,000.
Wow. Wow, that's
And
amazing.
that's strictly for first year applicants to
Sure.
Rutgers New Brunswick.
Yeah, so approximately 68,000 applications for 7,700 spots. So I could only imagine how busy the office has been. So thank you for all the great work that you do. So, are there any ways that applying to Rutgers differs from other colleges and universities?
Yes, there are certainly many similarities in the application process, but there are also some distinct differences. One, which I already mentioned and spoke about a bit, is that the fact that students are not just applying to Rutgers University for admission, but in
Mhm.
fact are applying to one or more of the academic schools within Rutgers. So, unlike perhaps a smaller liberal arts college where you just apply for admission to that college, here you're going to be asked to be a little bit more specific. Um, Understanding that we totally get that many of our applicants may be undecided on the academic area that they wish to study.
Mhm.
They're maybe don't have an idea what they want to major in yet. But within that context, again, they are going to be asked to submit an application or indicate on their Rutgers application one or more specific academic schools. Another way that applying to Rutgers differs from a lot of other colleges and universities is that our applicants are required to complete and submit what's called the Self-Reported Academic Record, or SRAR, instead of having their high school send us an official high school transcript. So effectively, SRAR just takes the responsibility for reporting the applicant's high school record. It puts it on the shoulders of the applicant themselves rather than their high school counseling office. The SRAR is used by a number of other, primarily other large public institutions, but it's not certainly that common. That a lot of our applicants will be like, "Oh, what's this?" So we have a lot of information about the SRAR on our admissions website to kind of help guide them through it, as well as folks like myself are always more than happy to lend a hand and answer questions about that part of the process. And finally, and And this is one difference in applying to Rutgers between a lot of other college universities that surprises many people, is that Rutgers, at least currently, the New Brunswick campus, does not require, nor do we use any letters of recommendation in the application and admissions decision process. So again, that surprises some people, but that's currently the way we operate.
Well, that's terrific. And I know that you mentioned earlier that there's a supplemental essay for the honors college, yet for the general application, two things. Number one, no letters of recommendation, and students apply with the self-reported academic record. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Perfect. So I just wanted to repeat that to make sure that everyone understands. And I know that Rutgers, like so many other schools throughout the country, is in fact test optional. But I was curious, does the test optional policy apply to all of your programs and majors? Some schools report, for example, that they are test optional, but if you're applying to some of their more competitive majors, they may actually require for you to submit test scores. So how does it work at Rutgers University, specifically on your campus at New Brunswick?
Yeah, great question also. We are truly test optional across the board at Rutgers
Hmm.
New Brunswick. We do not require submission of SAT or ACT scores to any of our schools, any of our academic undergraduate schools, or any of our majors at the university or specifically at the New Brunswick campus of Rutgers. I'd like to take a minute to distinguish between
Please.
what's known as test optional and test blind
Hmm.
because actually, I believe Rutgers Newark campus admissions is test blind, whereas Rutgers New Brunswick and Rutgers Camden admissions are test optional. The difference is pretty simple. It means that if a student applies to Rutgers New Brunswick, or I should say any of the schools at Rutgers New Brunswick, they will be asked on their application if they intend to submit the results of SAT or ACT exams with their application. If they say, no, I'm not, then we will obviously not use them in the decision-making process. However, if a student does indicate that they plan to submit test scores when they apply to Rutgers, we will use those test scores in the admissions decision-making process. Now, that could be for better or for worse.
Hmm.
So we always advise students, put some thought into it before you decide whether or not you want to submit your standardized test scores when you apply to Rutgers New Brunswick. Um, on the other hand, a school like Rutgers Newark, or there are some other universities out there that are test blind. And simply that means that whether you send test scores or not, they will not be looked at. They will not be used in the admissions decision-making process.
Well, I appreciate you talking about the test optional nature and the test blind nature of the overall application process specific to your campus and some others. Can you share, Drew, the percentage of students that applied and who were admitted that did not submit their test scores? And where do you see the test optional nature of the application review process going over the next few years?
Sure, that's an easy question at Rutgers New Brunswick. 50-50.
Perfect.
Roughly half of all of our applicants this year and for the last few years chose to submit test scores and half did not. And of the students that were admitted, roughly half had submitted test scores and roughly half had not. In terms of where we see test optional nature of the review process going in the coming years, I can't speak too far into the future. As far as Rutgers New Brunswick admissions is concerned, we have been making the decision on an annual basis as to whether we will remain test optional. As of now, we have committed to remaining test optional for all of our schools and all of our programs at Rutgers New Brunswick through at least the next application year. In other words, students applying for the fall of 2025. Rutgers New Brunswick admissions and enrollment spent a very large amount of time before the university went test optional a few years ago. We spent a long amount of time really working hard to create a review process that would ensure equal consideration, the old level playing field for all of our applicants, whether they chose to submit test scores or whether they did not. And it seems like the data are indicating that that was a good investment of our time and effort. Looking at the persistence rate of the students, whether they submitted test scores or not. We are not finding any particular red flags or areas of concern that would lead us to second guess our test optional policy at this point.
Well, I appreciate that input. And a lot of the reps that I interview are saying similar things. You know, a lot of them went test optional because of COVID. And what they're doing is looking at the data, as you put it, to see if there are any differences in terms of how students are doing in class, graduation percentages. I assume that if they don't see a major shift, that the test optional nature of the application process will likely remain. But it'll be very interesting to see how things progress. But I also want to just warn students and their parents, it's always best to check the individual colleges or universities' website for the latest information on all of that and so much more. So let's talk a little bit more about supports, right? Because Rutgers has so much, but I was curious, what supports does Rutgers offer its students to ensure that they continue to be successful once they are on your campus? I ask this question not only for students who may have had an IEP or a 504 plan while in high school, but for all your students.
Sure. Well, certainly for students with documented learning challenges, we have an entire office of disability services, and they work with those students to provide all reasonable accommodations that they might need to help ensure their success at Rutgers. Beyond that, our Dean of Students office offers student support. They provide advocacy. They provide connections for students to campus resources. They provide assistance for temporary conditions, as well as challenges due to things like health, financial challenges, personal and family, and other confidential matters. On the academic support side, we have 4 different learning centers scattered around the New Brunswick campus. They kind of are the locus for things like tutoring. They offer drop-in tutoring. They offer study groups. All of these services, by the way, are completely free for our students. They're never going to be looking at paying additional for drop-in tutoring or extra help or anything like that. The services are also primarily offered in person or online, whichever is going to work better for the student in question. The learning centers offer academic coaching and mentoring, which is also free. Also, many of our individual academic schools have their own variety or offerings, if you will, in terms of tutoring and academic help. So, a lot of times students will find all the support that they need within the specific school that they are enrolled in. They won't even necessarily need to go to the Dean of Students, Student Support Services, or anything like that. And finally, I always talk to students, prospective college students, about the fact that there's always going to be a lot of informal help available in college. And it's the kind of help that you don't necessarily think about ahead of time or you don't read about it, but it's going to be there. And it might simply be, the RA, the resident assistant on your hall in your freshman year, might be chatting with you, and you might talk to them and say, hey, I'm really struggling with calculus 2 this semester.
Hmm.
Well, that upper class student who's working as your RA, they might say, you know what, I did too when I was in your grade, and somebody helped me get through it. So let me see if I can help you get through it. So in addition to all of the kind of formal student support and help that is available, very often you will find that there's, particularly at a school the size of Rutgers, New Brunswick, there is also going to be abundant informal help and channels to help our students persist and eventually graduate.
Well, again, there's definitely something for everyone at Rutgers University, whether it's inside your classrooms with the many majors and minors that you offer, not to mention all of the activities that are offered to students outside of the classroom. You talked about the athletics. Perhaps, though, most importantly, all of these supports that you just defined are really so important because, you're admissions counselors. You want everyone to come to your school. But I love how mindful you are in terms of making sure that students are not only successful once they're on your campus, but you're there to support them, to make sure that they graduate, but also to set them up for their futures, as they move on to join that Scarlet Knight alumni network. So, Drew, this has been a phenomenal conversation. And I have to ask you before I get to the last question, is there a question I didn't ask today, or perhaps a topic that I didn't bring up that you'd like to talk about now?
Sure. Um, you can ask me why the mailing address for the Rutgers New Brunswick admissions office is Piscataway, New Jersey, and not New Brunswick, New Jersey.
Well, you know what they say, Drew. Piscataway is that away.
Exactly.
So
Um,
why is
the,
that, Drew?
there's a very good logical explanation for that.
Right.
So Rutgers, New Brunswick is kind of a misnomer.
Hmm.
Everybody calls it the New Brunswick campus of Rutgers, but the reality is Rutgers, New Brunswick is comprised of 5 smaller campuses, and those 5 smaller campuses are all either in or around New Brunswick, New Jersey. 2 of those smaller campuses are actually physically located in the village of, or the town of, Piscataway, New Jersey, which is right next to New Brunswick. I usually, when I'm talking to students in the New York metropolitan area, I use the New York City analogy, which is everybody is familiar with the city of New York. Well, the city of New York is comprised of 5 boroughs. You've got the Bronx, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island. Similarly, the New Brunswick campus of Rutgers is actually comprised of 5 smaller campuses. And if you'd like to know their names, they are Bush, Livingston, College Avenue, Cook, and Douglas. Each one is relatively self-sufficient. They are all either next to each other or within a couple miles of each other. And our students typically will find that they are spending time on multiple, if not all, of the 5 campuses over the course of their time at the university. But that is the answer as to why the admissions office, which is actually physically located on the Bush campus in New Brunswick, is actually in Piscataway, New Jersey, not New Brunswick.
Well, that's definitely very interesting and unique, and I appreciate you sharing that. And again, Rutgers University, they're so lucky to have you, as were we during this conversation. Unfortunately, Drew, it does lead us to that last question, which is what are the top 3 pieces of advice you would provide a student and their parents getting ready for the college admissions process?
Sure. Number 1 is highly recommend that the students set up an email account that they are going to use only for college-related communications. I would also recommend that that be the same email account that they use for anything like registering for the SAT or the ACT. 2 sub bits of advice within that is typically don't use an email account for college work that is connected to or offered through your high school. For a variety of reasons, one of which is that many of the school-based email servers will block or reject messages sent from colleges. And the other suggestion is once you've set up your college admissions email account, check your inbox regularly. And that doesn't mean once a week or once a month. That means regularly, frequently, because that is going to be the way most colleges are going to primarily communicate with you. My second bit of advice would be visit, visit, visit. I understand it can be challenging sometimes to visit colleges you're interested in, but try at least to visit the colleges to which you are applying. If you cannot visit a college in person, then certainly utilize any virtual tours, virtual information sessions that school is making available to you. Um, in addition, when you're visiting a college or university, I always advise students try and set aside a bit of time, either before or after doing a student-guided campus tour, to walk around on your own. Go rogue, separate yourself from everybody in admissions, and if you can bring yourself to do it, maybe try and introduce yourself to some current students and talk to them on campus. Ask them, what do they like about the school? What don't they like about the school? They'll tell you. Believe me, they'll give you the honest truth. And my third bit of advice is don't be surprised to be surprised. We all develop a mental picture or an idea or an image in our mind of what a particular college or university is going to be like. But don't be surprised, particularly if once you visit that college or university or you learn more about a given school, it turns out to be quite different than what you expected or than what you were picturing or envisioning in your mind. So try to keep an open mind about what schools might be right for you and accept that the school or the schools that you think would be perfect for you at the beginning of your college search, they may end up not even making it to the final list of schools that you're going to apply to. So don't be surprised that you might be surprised.
Well, I love that. Don't be surprised that you might be surprised. And you're right. The importance of visiting. I could tell you that with my own child, she had one particular school in mind. She thought for sure she was going to go there. We visited. And for her, she realized it was way too far from home. It was about a 6.5 hour drive. It was way too big for her. I loved it, by the way, but it wasn't the right fit for her. So I know that sometimes it's difficult, whether it's because of financial reasons or even if you have the money to travel and to visit so many campuses, sometimes it's really difficult to just coordinate the family schedule,
Sure.
particularly if, parents are working, children are in school. But if you can't visit before you apply, we always give the advice you owe it to yourself to definitely visit before you matriculate because like you said, don't be surprised to be surprised. So that school that you think for sure is what you want, you may visit it and absolutely love it or not, right? So
Yep.
it really is important. And I just wanted to repeat that. Drew, this has been phenomenal. Like I said many times, Rutgers is so lucky to have you, as were we. I do hope to have you back. Thank you so much, Drew.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, John. It's been a real pleasure talking with you today.
It's our honor and pleasure. And to everyone out there, good luck and best wishes with your college search. Take care, all. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The CAP, the College Admissions Process Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please don't forget to tell a friend and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and wherever you listen to your podcast. I am your host, John Durante, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of The CAP. I want to welcome back Sean Patel, who's the CEO and founder of Prep Expert. Sean, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, John. Just wanted to do a quick shout out for an amazing deal that we have for college admissions process podcast listeners. We're offering 30% off all Prep Expert SAT and ACT courses and tutoring. It's live online. We've got the best score improvement guarantees in the industry. You'll get taught by 99 percentile instructors. And you can save 30% off when you go to the show notes of the College Admissions Process podcast. Grab your discount code for 30% off and click the link in the show notes.
Thank you, Sean. So great to have you again. And to everyone out there, please note that if you make a purchase through any of our affiliate links, the podcast gets a commission. But rest assured that we would only promote products that we believe in and feel would benefit our listeners. Thank you all and best wishes.